The rhythm, so to speak, of this week's gospel and last week's recounting of the journey of the way to Emmaus are rather similar, but in that similarity they form two sort of counterpoints to each other. It's not just that they're sort of one half of a story, but they play off of each other and develop each other. In the story of the road to Emmaus, we find the two disciples who are journeying alone, and Christ sort of secretly joins them. And then when they recount the narrative of the past few days in Jerusalem, they sort of provoke the Lord into placing the history of those events within the context of the Scriptures. And in this opening of the Scriptures to them, or maybe better, Christ injecting their lives into the Scriptures, then leads them to invite the Lord to remain with them, which in turn leads to the breaking of the bread and the revelation of the real presence of Christ in their midst. And then this week, in the story of the appearance in the upper room, we find the same two disciples, having run all the way back from Emmaus, are now sharing the fruit of the broken bread with the other disciples. Their experience of the risen Lord drives them to rush to share that experience, and then that sharing in the midst of the other disciples leads to the revelation of Christ in their presence, and eventually then the opening up of now the Scriptures to the 11. So again, the two movements form a kind of rhyming couplet with each other. And I think that the key word that links both of these movements is the word incredulous, which is actually a rather literal translation, as the Greek root word apisteo means unbelieving. For the 11, the simple, bare visual experience of the Lord is not enough for them to actually believe their own eyes. So Christ reinforces that reality with a physical demonstration by eating the fish, and then a spiritual demonstration by revealing himself through the Scriptures. And this, I think, gives us a sort of sketch of the lived reality of the church as she will be going forward from this point, even down to today. We see in the way that Christ reveals and verifies himself to the church of the disciples that word and sacrament are both required within the context of the believing communion of the church in order for us to truly experience the reality of the presence of the Lord. On the way to Emmaus, the two disciples were together. There are two of them, so they are in a kind of communion, but they were stuck ruminating on sort of the news of the day rather than being open in faith. Enmeshed in the world, they were unable to see the context of what had happened from a spiritual perspective, and so they needed the Lord to elevate them outside their individual context and reveal the divine. In the upper room, the disciples were also together as a group, but they were afraid. It wasn't that they were sort of together to support each other, they were together to sort of keep everything else out. They were trapped in themselves. And they too were only looking at things from the perspective of the world, and they needed the Lord to open them up to his own view, so that then they wouldn't just sort of understand, but so then they could be sent as witnesses to that truth that stands above the events of the world. Having the group experience of that reality is then what sustains the individuals in the midst of the world. When they are sent out, then doubts or hardships begin to enter in, and they eclipse their experience of the Lord. We can look at ourselves. In my own individual lack of faith, I rely on the church to continue to bear me up when I am beset by doubts or when I question. And then when my faith is strong, well, then I am able to be that support to another, to be able to be the one that props them up, that allows them to sort of be verified in the Lord going forward. So if the concrete experience and the shared reality is what then allows for the church to go forward and announce the gospel, not just back then, but here and now, then I think they can prompt in us some questions to reflect upon in order to see how or whether we are making use of what the Lord has shared with us. Like, how do I prepare for the opening of the Scriptures? Do I ever read them on my own, or do I at least go and read about them? So then I have something with which the Lord can begin to sort of pry open my mind to the truth. The disciples on the way to Emmaus obviously knew the Scriptures because Christ could discuss it with them. He could point out events. They didn't have like a book to continue to reference. It was a part of their life. They were aware of it. Christ could then take that awareness, that knowledge, and allow it to be shown to them in a meaningful way. Do we have that same awareness of the Word? Are we familiar enough with the Scriptures to be able to allow the Lord to do that for us? Do we really seek to be nourished by the bread of life? Do we approach the Lord so that he might reveal himself to us, and not just in sort of the good ways, the ways that make us feel nice, but maybe even in disruptive ways? The two disciples, again, once they got to Emmaus, have that experience of the Lord, and they're driven by that experience to run all the way back to Jerusalem in the night. Have I ever allowed the Lord to confront me in that kind of a way? To reveal himself, to confront me so that it demands that now I act differently going forward? Do we ever discuss the fruit of the Eucharist that has been born in our own lives? Do we ever invite others into a discussion of that sort? Do we share with other people, friends or family, how the Lord is revealing himself to us, whether in uplifting ways or in challenging ways, in ways that make demands of us that maybe we aren't yet ready to fulfill? Do we seek to open up a space in the shared parts of our lives for the Lord to reveal himself not only to us, but also to them? And in that revelation then to them, to allow us maybe to see him more clearly. In reflecting on how or whether we imitate the early church in the rhythm of our lives, I hope it can encourage all of us to be more those paschal witnesses here and now which the Lord has charged us with being from the very beginning. And in recognizing our lack, our failings, the ways in which we do not live out as those witnesses, then perhaps it can open up within us the desire to seek out the Lord, to ask for his grace, so that we may go forward and proclaim his gospel as well.